I'm going to make sure that this is a context of safety and help them to learn how to be safe.
Hi, I'm John Carlson, and I'm joined by psychologist and master trainer, Dr. Bruce Crapuchettes. Welcome, Bruce.
Yeah, hello. Glad to be here.
Let's start with just finding out, just what does imago mean?
Well, imago was a word chosen by Harville, who's the innovator and developer of imagotherapy. It's the Latin word for image. And so it's really a representation of thousands of images that we bring into our head of our parents, really our primary caretakers. So whoever raised us in our home of origin, we just have hundreds of positive images, hundreds of negative images, and it's really the way we know who our parents are. So just day one, it's always surprised me how a little child can all of a sudden know who mommy is. And the reason they do that is that they're always bringing images in their head of who mommy and daddy is for survival purposes. And then that's really the image, the composite image we use later in life to go out and search for a mate.
So what does an imago therapist do? Does an imago therapist help one become aware of these images, or dump the ones that don't work, or just how does therapy tie into the imago?
Well, we're really coming from a theoretical framework that we were wounded in our homes of origins, and the person who wounded us is really the only one who can heal us. We can't really be healed from our wounds of childhood by someone else. So we take this composite image and we go out into life and on a search and find mission, and we find somebody who seems to really match up with that image.
And somebody who can wound us in the same way?
Absolutely. So the person we're with is a person who potentially can re-wound us more than anyone else in the world.
Wow.
And also then, of course, has that wonderful potential to bring healing into our lives.
Well, so I should thank my wife for this, or she should thank me for our ability to wound one another?
Well, absolutely. I've always loved that movie title, Sleeping with the Enemy, because we really are sleeping with the person who could hurt us the most when we go to bed with our wives. So
what does imago therapy mean for you, or just how is your approach to imago therapy maybe different from other imago therapists? Maybe that's two questions there.
Yeah, probably not much different than other imago therapists, because we pretty much work in the same way if we're really working in the model of imago therapy. What it means to me, it's really transformed my life personally. I've been married for 34 years, and about 10 or 12 years ago, my marriage was in shambles. We were falling apart and thinking of divorce, and came across Harville's work and went to a workshop, and it just really hit us profoundly and just put us on a totally different path.
So that's really how you became an imago therapist. You really worked on your own life with this approach, and it changed it?
That's right. Yeah, I hadn't heard of imago therapy, so I wasn't drawn to it from a theoretical viewpoint. But it just really helped our marriage to survive. And then in our practice, my wife's a psychologist also, and we've been working with couples for years, but I don't think we've been helping them much.
So two psychologists couldn't get their act together.
Couldn't get our act together, right.
And didn't have the tools from your traditional training, and then you discovered this.
That's right. We started going to marriage therapists. We'd gone to maybe 5 or 6 different marriage therapists, and that just made it worse.
What was the difference between maybe what this is called the traditional marriage therapy that you were given and that you gave others, and this approach?
Well, what I was able to do in marriage therapy, I could always get the therapist to align with me. So it was always the therapist and me against Francine.
I see.
And so she just hated going to therapy because she knew she was going to end up the bad person. And that's what I really actually believed. I believed it was mostly her fault. And so I usually was able to convince the therapist of that. And,
so therapy was just the confirmation of what you already knew.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. And so how did this change when you met with Harville's work?
Well, what's so important that was just revolutionary for me was to realize we both equally contribute to whatever's going on in a relationship. And we tend to find somebody who is equally wounded with us, equally intelligent, and equally interested to be on a journey of growth and healing. I thought I was not wounded in childhood. I had ideal parents, and the problem was Francine. But that made so much sense to me that I just believed it intellectually. I'm still learning it in my being that I am just as wounded as Francine. And now it's just opening up a whole door of understanding about my background, which I didn't understand before.
This is a process that continues. I mean, you didn't get cured 10 years ago?
Didn't get cured 10 years ago. Yeah, it is. It's a work in process always. And Francine and I are practicing imagotherapy all the time at home.
With each other?
With each other. We go on a walk every single morning, and we do dialogues and really do the process in a very kosher way.
Can you talk about that? You kind of mentioned did the process. What is doing the process?
Well, we see that the process is so much more important than the content. We get so caught up in our content, like I'm really upset about the way she's handling Dominic or something, our son. And so that content. And I think we got to solve that content. But what's really key is how we talk to each other, how we talk about that content. And so the process is much more important than the content. And so when I'm with a couple, I'm hardly paying much attention to the content. I'm not trying to solve their content. I'm really helping them to be in a process with each other that is a healing process.
And that's probably very different than what you used to do as a therapist. You probably focused more on the content?
I was a problem solver.
Okay.
And helped them solve the problems. But what we've discovered is that couples solving a problem doesn't solve their marriage. The problem will just pop up here or pop up over there or move from sex to dishes or triangulation with the children. Solving problems doesn't heal marriage.
I see. So that's the process. And how does the dialogue fit into this? Is the dialogue a way to get to get at the process?
Yes. Well, maybe I'd say it this way, in that what I'm always thinking about when I'm working with a couple is how can I help them to connect, that we want to connect. And so I'm facilitating them to be in dialogue with each other. So that's why I always have them sit facing each other. And I'm then, like I would never have them on a couch facing me, because it looks like I'm the source of healing. I want them facing each other so that they can really start doing this healing process themselves and get in connection with each other and start a growth and healing journey.
Okay. Now, can you talk about how this process works? I mean, just maybe go into a little bit more in depth.
Okay. Well,
I mean, this whole healing process, I mean, you've talked about people have these wounds, and so how does talking with one another, how is it helpful? How does that process?
Well, theoretically, we come from an assumption that we are all connected, like the whole universe is connected. The sun is connected with the earth. I'm connected with you, even though I hadn't known you. We're just all connected. And then there was a disruption. At birth, that's a disruption, the birth trauma. And then just whenever pain comes into our life, that's a disruption of this connection. And we defend ourselves against that disruption by becoming self-absorbed, really. Like if I get a pain, like I all of a sudden step on something and it scratches my foot, whatever connection I'm having with you disappears, and I become absorbed on my pain. So we're all self-absorbed in our personal pain. And so what we're trying to do now is to try to reconnect these people that are self-absorbed because of their pain. And in the reconnection, a healing happens.
And that reconnection comes through?
Well, engaging. Like clients want to talk to me, and I say, talk to him, because I don't want him to get connected with me. I want him to get connected with her. And so the connection and the dialogue is doing a major thing. We use the word symbiosis in imagotherapy, meaning when I become self-absorbed, I start thinking that I have the only right view of the world. My political opinions are the right opinions. My tastes are the right tastes.
I thought that was me. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I might ask, I see you eating an olive, and I say, what? You like olives? And I have that little frown on my face, which means I'm surprised. Why am I surprised? Well, I don't like olives.
Right.
So why would you like olives? You know, or what? You like that movie? That was the shallowest movie and you know. So whenever I'm surprised at your point of view, that means I'm symbiotic. That I think that you should be seeing the world my way. Well, that's really what's happening with couples. Is that they are surprised. They can't believe that their partner has a different viewpoint.
So by focusing on the process and dialoguing with one another, is there an insight then? Is insight a part of this, where you get an insight into this?
Yes. What happens is that we're trying to break the symbiosis. So in the dialogical process, they actually start to realize there is another viewpoint. And this other viewpoint makes just as much sense as mine. And so it pulls them out of their symbiosis, and it breaks the symbiosis. And now they start getting connected. And what gets connected, because the healing, that which heals really, is empathy. So we lose our sense of empathy when pain comes in our lives early in our...
So it's putting yourself in somebody else's world.
Right. And so when I can get out of myself and I can empathically see a point of view from another person's viewpoint, that's what heals. And so when I get them in dialogue and I hold them in dialogue, the symbiosis is being broken and they start seeing from a different viewpoint.
And so this would be something, following this theory, that people would need to do on a regular basis if they're ever going to break these symbiotic patterns that they're in. And it's a lifelong journey, or
It is. That there's no sort of moment of huge insight that then breaks the knot and now we're healed.
Home free.
We're home free. That doesn't happen. It's a day-by-day learning process of pulling myself out of my self-absorption and learning how to really see another person's viewpoint.
So just like we work out physically on a regular basis, we need to work out in this relationally with our partners in this fashion?
And that's the main work I have, is to figure out how can I get this couple to be doing this work on a daily basis. Because if they just see me once a week or once every other week, that's not going to do it. And a lot of times when they see the dollar amount, the husband, when they first come in and say, well, let's see, how long is this going to take? You know, they're thinking, how long, before she's cured? And I need to really help them to realize this is going to be a journey, a lifelong journey. That's probably the biggest thing that Imago has meant for me, is that it's allowed me to see that I'm on a life journey with Francine for growth and healing.
Yeah, and you never get it totally.
Right.
Yeah. So this is something that you need to do with couples. You don't do this with individuals?
I just limit my practice to couples. See, we were wounded in a relational context, and therefore healing needs to be relational. Now, growth can be somewhat individual, but actual healing of a wound has to be relational. Like if what we see healing is getting some emotional need met that wasn't met in childhood. So let's say I didn't get enough hugs. I can't go to private individual psychotherapy and get that wound healed unless the therapist is willing to hug me, and then probably he'll go to jail. But it has to happen in a relational context. And so when we see individuals in imagotherapy, we see them in group therapy.
I see.
Because individuals need to be in a relational context. So I train therapists how to do imagotherapy in a group context, and individuals then do imagotherapy in group.
I see. So it's more of a group or a couple kind of a process. When you do this work with people, then they get this insight. Is there any, days of managed care, or, I'm thinking of, is there assignments? Is there homework? Or don't we have to have some kind of a change in behavior?
Absolutely. a behavior change has to happen, or the system won't change. But it has to, you have to set it up to where the heart wants to do the work. And we call it gifting of the other person.
So you can't just tell somebody to do something, really. It has to be...
Well, sometimes I give assignments, but what I'm really pulling for when I see a couple is I'm wanting to set it up so that this person here will see the other person from a totally different viewpoint and start getting an empathic connection. And out of their sense of empathy, they will want to gift them with some behavior change, which will really be a healing change for this other person.
Well, in a few minutes, we're going to watch, you work with a couple. Can you talk a little bit about that for our viewers, of what they might be looking for in this interview?
Well, what I'm, number one, have on my mind when I see a couple is this couple is in a state of disruption. They're feeling disconnected. They're self-absorbed. I want to help them to reconnect. So my whole focus is helping them to connect with each other. And the connection is very scary because out of childhood, the way they've defended themselves is to become self-absorbed. And to break through that is a very frightening process. So my number one goal is to keep this session safe. I want them to feel safe to open up. And I find that the number one issue with couples is to help them to learn how to feel safe in each other's presence. Because at a very deep level, they're facing the enemy, the person who can re-wound them just as badly as they were wounded in childhood.
So you create kind of a non-judgmental, or what used to be called a holding environment for this, for this couple? It's
so important for me to stay neutral. And it's so tempting not to. I'll identify with this person. I know the bad guy here. It's this one. He just had an affair.
Especially if they're like your wife. Then we really jump in.
That's right. And I just got to stay neutral. And just know they've equally contributed. They're equally wounded. You never fall in love with somebody who's at a different level of wounding than you are. So it may appear that way, that you're not...
Wait, say that again. You never...
Yeah, see, the chemistry of romantic love is to find someone who has the images of your parents and has the same potential to wound you as much as their parents. And therefore they're very wounded, just like your parents were wounded. And they're going to be at the same level of wounding. Like if they're really wounded badly in sort of as a 2-year-old, then that means I'm basically an emotional 2-year-old also.
So we pick out somebody who's as messed up as we are.
Right.
And they pick out somebody who's as messed up as they are.
I think a good analogy of that is you go to a playground and you don't see 12-year-olds naturally playing with 8-year-olds. 12-year-olds play with 12-year-olds. 8-year-olds play with 8-year-olds because you always team up with the same emotional maturity level. So if you see a 35-year-old dating an 18-year-old, we just know they're emotionally equal. Either he's very immature or she's very mature. They're equally emotionally.
So one of the things our viewers are going to do is watch the way you create this safe network or safe place.
Yeah.
What else?
So that's my number one goal, is to keep it safe. Then I'm knowing that it's going to be scary to connect, so that I'm always trying to get them to connect. And so I need to keep it safe so they can connect. And then gradually I'm wanting them to get in touch with that whatever's going on here is a result of childhood wounding. And so it's not that this is a bad guy, it's that my pain is bubbling up. And so I want them to get in touch with their earlier pain. And as soon as they do that, the person here who has, let's say for the past week, has been blamed, can realize, well, I'm not such a bad guy. This person is really wounded. And so that then a whole empathy starts to emerge.
And so it sort of takes people off the hook a little bit for creating this misery that's going on. It's really back there is where it came from.
Yeah. And that's been a wonderful thing for me, because I was raised in a very judgmental background. And we were the people who were right in the world and everybody else was wrong. And now I just view everybody so different. I see TV and see an individual or a murderer, and I realize, This is not a bad guy. This is a guy who's very wounded. And
You were raised in China with missionary parents, so
Right.
it really did seem that way.
yeah,
much
we
more
were the
for you.
little enclave of those who were right and
Yeah.
knew the truth, and we were bringing the truth to
Enlightened,
this
yeah.
whole 2 billion Chinese who were wrong. And so I was raised to have that sort of right-wrong viewpoint, to be very judgmental.
How did it go? No, we won't go there. Okay, so we'll really watch the way you create the safety, the way you get people to connect and create this environment. And then probably something we also ought to tell people too is that it's important to have Kleenex. And
Yes.
we didn't do that in this interview,
Right.
but
I couldn't believe it. Halfway through this, I said, how can I be doing therapy without Kleenex?
well, we
sitting next
didn't.
to me?
So we'll need Kleenex too. So watch when that comes in. So let's watch and see.
Okay.